Hello, Briot.
Hey Brian, how are you? All?
Yes, I think it's day 97 now that we've been inside. So we're getting close to that 100th episode. I'm looking forward to that. Um, so today I wanted to talk about that. I know this is outside of your field, but you know enough about the human condition that you could talk about it quite easily, I'm sure. But looking at the distinction of when people talk about being alpha male, an alpha female,
Hmm.
and what kind of and doing eventually doing a comparison about what are transformational behaviors, what are spiritual behaviors,
Hmm.
and what are alpha behaviors.
Hmm.
And the reason why I'm doing it is that there is a fair amount of alpha interest. I mean, there's countless numbers of websites and courses to teach men to be alpha men as opposed to be to beta men, and which I find fascinating. So, are you beta? Are you alpha? So, I think there's a lot of interest in wanting to be alpha, and I just wanted to break that down a little bit and make a comparison with spiritual practices.
Okay.
So, just to be able to define what alpha is, I'm just gonna. Any thoughts come up for you right off the bat about what an alpha male is? Alpha males are easier to describe than alpha females.
Hmm. Well, from what I understand, the alpha male is basically he wants to be the guy. He wants to be the one calling the shots, and he wants to be the one that has the control over situation,
Yes.
over others. Yeah, and nobody is supposed to be able to challenge him. So it's like he wants to be an autocrat.
Yes. So where do you think this came from? I mean, where did like alpha is not new at all.
Yeah.
So where do you think the alpha behaviors came from?
Well, according to the Vedic philosophical conceptions, is that all the living entities, all the different souls, that we're all part and parcels of the supreme whole. So there's like a supreme alpha, the creator or God, and
Okay.
that everybody is working in cooperation as a unit, being part of that like entity. So when one, by exerting one's own free will, which every soul has, then has the desire to want to occupy that post of the supreme controller or the supreme alpha, so to speak. So,
Yes.
so then this material world is created where you can come and then you can pretend that you're an alpha. You can pretend. You get the chance to give it a shot. You get a chance to compete with other alpha people or entities who also want to be alpha, and then you can come and do it as a male or as a female or in different species of life. You get the chance to do that. So essentially, the whole impetus um, that drives this whole material world is controlling. It's called in Sanskrit. It's called Ishvara Bhav. Ishvara means controller, and Bhav means like you have this mood. So everybody has this Ishvara Bhav. They want to control, and you see, the moment somebody gets power, it oftentimes changes their whole personality. They become a different person,
Sure.
and it's because this Ishvara Bhav gets kindled within their heart, and then they just like become intoxicated by it. So I think that it's one of the fundamental principles which drives materialistic life. And in this world, this dog eat dog society, it's all about being the main dog, Um, and it's something that happens. It's everybody wants it. And if you're a weaker dog, you still want to be the main dog, but you know that there's that dog's more powerful than you, so you're not going to try and fight him for it either. But at heart, it's still there. You're just thinking, when is my opportunity to take that guy down? But it's like a subtle thinking. So I think it's very fundamental to a conditioned state of consciousness to think like that in terms of wanting to be the alpha. And it is
Right.
yeah.
Beautiful. I mean, you covered a lot of ground very, very quickly. So the place I'm going to want to end up is making the relationship between what we would call the false ego and alpha male behaviors. But I want to back up to the beginning, and it's that I think that there was like when you look at pack animals and wolves and dogs, and they're constantly vying for who is the alpha.
Mm.
And that and it makes, with dogs, I mean, they do it. It's within their nature. They're not
Yeah.
stopping doing that. They've been doing that forever. And I think that with humans is that, especially when you were living in the jungle, and it mattered that you moved as a cohesive unit. And the alpha, they would always determine an alpha male for the most part. Um, there's some discrepancies about how some tribes were actually run, as they evolved. But I'll go back to what I'll guess are the earliest days of alpha.
Mm.
And in that, so you brought us some things about, so you want to be in control, you want to have access to the best females, and all the females are interested in being with the alpha male. That's why the men want to be an alpha.
Yeah.
And that things get to go your way, you get to be the king.
Mm.
So that's not such a bad thing. But everybody depends on you. And that there was some, the National Geographic did a documentary on apes and men, and they took some men and put them into car mechanics, and they put them into a situation, and then they virtually watched what male behaviors were amongst apes, and they filmed it about what they were doing, and then they filmed what the males were doing in the auto shop for this documentary. It's embarrassing, actually. It's so good.
It's the same.
They would go, well, and then the alpha gorillas would do this, and there'd be an action, and then they'd shoot back to the men, and they did more or less the same things.
Wow.
In a human and in a context of an auto mechanic shop documentary. So it really was fascinating. So you can look that up. That's National Geographic, and it's about alpha male comparing men to gorillas. So I think that there is something in nature. There's something that I do think it's a survival mechanism. I think it's a lower level of thinking. I think we can become more conscious and make choices that are not survival choices. And that alpha seems to be, one of the lower rungs on that rack. So to be in control, I'm just going to go over some of the things that you said. To compete. So that have you ever been around two males that were competing for alpha?
Yeah.
In a group of men?
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
It's pretty nice.
I'm assuming you weren't one of the ones competing.
No, not me.
So what was it like?
Pretty unpleasant.
Yeah, so it's unpleasant. They are at each other. They're one downing each other. They're looking at each other's eyes. I mean, I've seen dogs fight. It looks exactly the same ultimately. That the reason, and what would your reasonings be, like when you see alpha males and males, vying for a position in a group? Why do you not get involved in the competition?
In the competition. Well,
yeah.
I don't have interest.
And in your younger days before you were a monk.
Yeah.
Not that these things aren't showing up in your community, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. I don't have interest in what these people are competing for. The prize that they want to get. I don't have interest in that.
Yes. But they have their little war about it. And then, for me, it's just the nonsense. Like what you actually have to do to be an alpha is really not, like most of the time I'll just avoid the group. I'm like, no, I'm not playing. I don't like these rules. Can't we just think together, and actually whoever's got the best ideas, then we kind of follow that direction and think together. There's some groups that are like that where you don't actually need somebody calling all the shots. Okay, so then you talked about the corporate. In the corporate situation is completely alpha, is that there's one job at the very top, and that people are in competition with one another. Everybody wants a corner office. Everybody wants to be a head of a department. Everybody wants to become the CEO at some point. And so that it is a competitive environment. And that people don't, it's also bad form to compete or create conflict openly. But you can do it under there's these undercurrents that you can create to challenge people and also to make them look bad. And then also with there's the thing that I found in corporates in consulting in corporates for a couple decades is that how I would describe the environment was that people were digging holes under you and pretending like they weren't
Yeah.
at any given time, and that's kind of the environment that gets created with alphas. So we've got the corporates, we've got control, we've got competition, digging holes under people and pretending like you're not as an environment.
Mm-hmm.
Dog eat dog is something that you said, dog eat dog world. Well, that we're talking exactly about alpha and competition. Yeah. So how would we relate alpha to the false ego? Like, is this really the best way to pick our leaders? And is it really that advantageous to be an alpha male?
Well, I think that maybe being an alpha is not good or bad in and of itself. It's more because it's just another position that you can occupy, like any other kind of position in life. And
Yeah.
it's more of to what end are you engaging that position? That's what's of importance. Like for example, in the ancient Vedic cultures, then it was monarchy, and the king is pretty much he's an alpha, and you had lesser kings, or they were called kshatriyas, like warriors, and they all had an extremely high code of honor that they were following. That if they would say, "I will do this," and they're not able to do it, then they'll take their own life because they would rather part with their life than part with their word. Because I said I'm going to do something, and sometimes competing kings or kshatriyas, they would take advantage of that. If they heard another kshatriya had made a particular vow, he would try and prevent him from fulfilling that vow. And even if that king could not fulfill his vow, because the other one played dirty, he would still give up his life because he gave his word and he was not able to keep it. And so it's extremely high. We don't see that today anymore. And these kings, it's something to aspire for. I'm even just getting goosebumps thinking of this type of consciousness where you are a person who has this tendency, and then there's like lesser kshatriyas, and then they have like smaller kingdoms, but they're serving under higher kshatriyas, and then you even get somebody who's emperor of the entire planet. And in the Puranas, they speak of many such personalities. So obviously that guy, he's like the main peanut, in the packet. He's like the big alpha. But all of these personalities, even the one who's right at the top, supposedly, they're utilizing that position to protect people. They're utilizing that position. There's no famine in their lands, no shortage of food, no poverty. Everybody was engaged accordingly to their nature, and everybody was able to make spiritual advancement. And all of them knew the purpose of human life is a spiritual one, and they have to manage the affairs of society in such a way that people can still progress on the spiritual path, and at the same time get to realize and satisfy the material desires too. So these personalities, they were actually using that alpha position in a proper way, in a mood of service, and they never identified with "I am the king." Sometimes they would, but then very quickly, if some sage, because they would take advice of people who are beyond society, like sages and very spiritually inclined, or how would I say, they're called brahmanas, like priests and sages and saints. So then the saint would come there and he would understand that this king is now identified with this position, and he would just tell him straight, "You're an illusion, you're not this body, you think you're a king, but actually you're not, because the positions can change very quickly. So you're attached." And then the king would immediately come to his senses and he would accept this good advice, because they can understand or recognize spiritual knowledge when they hear it. And then in this way, the kings were also kept on the kind of the right path. And is by the nature of engaging with material energy so intimately as it's natural to identify with the body a little bit, but they have their support system that they don't actually go very far down into that. So in that way, they can still, then they don't identify as "I'm a king." They just identify as "I'm in this position of a king, but I'm a servant still, and I'm just serving as a king, or I'm serving as an alpha." But now if you want to be an alpha and it's not your destiny, you're going to fight very hard for it, and you're not really going to make it. So then that means you should give up all that energy you're spending into that. If it comes without too much effort, then that's fine, then do it. But if you have to endeavor so much for it, it's not worth it, because anyway, the point of life is not to become an alpha, it's to become, purify yourself and realize your spiritual identity. So I think in that way, being an alpha in itself is not bad, but it's more the consciousness that you have when and how you're utilizing that position. And if it's used in a mood of service, it's very, very good. And in that case, a monarchy can actually be the best system of all if you actually have a qualified king to occupy that position, because then people will benefit.
And system,
Yeah,
king and system. Everybody else has to play. There's lots of stories of killing the king.
yeah,
So what came up for me when you were saying that was there's some North American Indians that what they did is that they watched the children play. And each generation, as the children were coming up, and they watched who the natural leaders were. All the kids would actually,
that's interesting.
follow and go around. And there was these natural leaders that they were able to identify when
Yeah,
they were quite little. And they would take the leaders that there'd be, one in virtually every generation. So that every about 5 or 10 years, they would actually be picking like who these kids were, and then they would start meeting with them. He would start with he would meet with the chief. They'd start grooming him to virtually become a chief.
and
And
training.
they started instilling in them, taking care of the group,
Mm,
that they made decisions based on how it would affect 7 generations.
mm,
There was a whole series of things that they did by identifying who the leaders were early, and then instilling in them the best values that they possibly could along the way,
wow,
which I find kind of fascinating.
yeah, that's beautiful.
And that you also said that we don't find a lot of these behaviors today of people being of the honor that you were just speaking of people not keeping their word and taking their life. I was just curious, though, that you said that there would be some warriors that would try and undermine another warrior because he said he would do something, and he would know the consequence is death.
Yeah.
How was that dealt with, or how was that seen or dealt with? Do you have any stories about somebody who did that and what the consequences were and how it was dealt by the kingdom?
All right. Okay. There's I would say for first, it's the nature of these kind of warriors to fight. It's in their nature. And this fighting propensity is engaged in protecting people firstly. And naturally they want to kind of, increase their dominance a bit. And if it's done like with the aim of wanting to just use your nature to protect people, then the citizens, they were never involved in any fighting. They were never involved in any fighting. If a kings or governments were changed, as long as they were doing their duty as a king, it didn't affect the citizens at all, if there was a change of government. So in that way, because the same principles, spiritual principles are universal. The difference comes when there's actually a government change and that government doesn't have proper values that it's based on, then it's a problem. And then, but anyway, so now you want to to different warriors, they like to test their prowess and everything. And there's a bit of an ego and thing involved with that. But the whole cultural system purifies all of that. But anyway, so you were asking me for an example. And there is one
Well,
example.
specifically, like you just indicated it, but you didn't really say much about it.
Yeah.
So
There's
that
this one
it
from
specifically when one warrior was trying to prevent another warrior to keep his word,
Yes.
knowing that the end result would be death.
Yes.
If the king found that out or somebody did, was there an intervention or how was that dealt with?
Okay. So during the Mahabharat war, it's this battlefield that took place in a place called Kurukshetra in India 5,000 years ago. There's actually the war that happened immediately after the Bhagavad Gita was spoken. And so these two sides, they were fighting, and there was this one warrior. He was very, very expert at entering into a certain formations. So different warriors, they were like specialized in certain tactics. And what happened was he was fighting so fiercely and quickly to enter into this one formation, which was basically like a circle. They call it the chakra vyuha. And his comrades could not follow with him into it. So he opened up the circle and he ended up inside. And then the circle closed, and he was alone inside there, fighting a lot of powerful warriors simultaneously, but and of equal stature. So he was fighting all day. And it was actually an unfair battle because he was fighting people who are of equal strength, but multiple of them. So this is not actually proper code of honor, because between warriors, because if I'm fighting somebody who's much weaker than me with a weapon that they don't know how to defend themselves against, what am I proving as a warrior? This is not accepted
Yeah.
in battle. So anyway, so he was killed eventually like this. And when Arjuna learned of this, it was his son, then he vowed to kill the person. Then he said, I vow that tomorrow I'm going to kill this person who had killed my son. And if I don't do this, I'm going to take my own life. If I don't kill him by when the time the sun sets. Because in those days, when the sun reached the horizon, fighting stopped. And then the people, they would just go and they'll take dinner together. The people were just fighting with each other. They'll just go and take dinner together, because it's nothing personal. What they're doing is not personal. Anyway, so everybody knew about this vow. It's a bit of a foreign culture, but you can go with the principle. Everybody knew of this. So what they did is they put as many soldiers as they could around that one person to protect him. And they knew that Arjuna was a man of his word, and he would take his life if he would fail. And so Arjuna, the next day, he was going for this person, and there were just too many people to fight through. So in that way, they responded to his vow, and they thought, okay, I think we're going to get rid of Arjuna today because we're going to protect this person. And then there were some events which happened, which Arjuna just before the end of the day was able to kill this person. So then he kept his vow, but this is how they responded in that way. They would actually they knew that the vow was made, and then they responded to that, and they took the advantage. They tried to get him out of the battle.
Okay. Now I misunderstood the context. So you're talking about warriors that are on different sides of a battle as opposed to within the same kingdom.
Oh yeah, okay. No. Within the same kingdom, you've got your alliances and stuff. So that kind of stuff didn't happen there. There was no backbiting and deception. Because they're honorable. If you want to take on a king, you go to him face to face and you say, "I challenge you." You don't.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Okay. So I misunderstood you. So
right,
I get it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So in talking about everyday people.
20 minutes. Yeah. So we can.
We're at 20 minutes.
Yeah. So 5-8 minutes we can take.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I have one last thought I think to explore, and we'll try and do this as quick as possible. But the alpha male thinking is to win at all costs. And depending on what your value, because you're talking about people with values that are high level values, there's a lot of honor in what they're doing. But if you have alpha male behaviors without honor, what does that look like? And so at the lowest levels, the nicest, the easiest, the alpha males that I've seen are, virtually I'll describe them. They're usually tall. They're usually good looking. They're usually good at things. They're usually athletic. The women are already attracted to them. And I've seen some alpha males where they're able to get the group of, they're able to capture a group of men as that they are the alpha male on this beach, in this place, in this community. And I've seen, like, at best, I've seen them, be looking out for the little ones, treat the other males respectfully, don't need an official title that they're alpha male, but if somebody needs to jump into action, that's the role that they take. If there's a leadership situation, he's the obvious guy that you want to follow, and you actually want to follow him. Yeah. Because of how he's directing everybody else. It's instant. If there's an alignment, like a school of fish, there's an alignment with the men, and you can move as one unit. You don't actually have to talk about it. And it comes from a place of honor. And then when we start, so there's all the alpha behaviors are the ones that are still being sought, but the honor is the thing that starts moving. So if we start looking at, to what degree somebody will undermine somebody else. One of the examples that I used is that if you take an alpha male and then you put him next to, which is also known as a very alpha environment, is prisons. So if you take an alpha male and put him beside a hardened criminal, and that he's still alpha, but there's no honor, or there's very much less honor. He'll do anything and to virtually win, and he'll become violent. There's a threat of violence, and he might be better and more willing to stab you with something than you are. So then that alpha male becomes a greater experience, or a greater alpha. He'll win out. So then you take then you'll take a criminal, a hardened criminal, and you put him beside a mafioso who has less values about what it is that he's going to do or not do, and that he has a whole group of people behind him. So even if you do kill him, even if he's a little short person, you know that something's going to happen to you and maybe your entire family. So that alpha wins out. So there's varying degrees, like right up to the warlord, or whatever you want to call it. It's all alpha behavior models, but what shifts is the honor, and values. And that most of our world, so that there's really a lot of talk about what alpha is, and very little talk about, what honor means and what honor's got to do with it.
Yeah.
Like we'll go to today in our corporate situations, our alpha behaviors, and that you're not allowed to look like you're causing shit, and you're not allowed to, create open conflict without losing respect.
Yeah.
But you can, but it's never, we never move away from digging holes under people and pretending like we're not, to varying degrees of malice, and certainly varying degrees of values. What are your thoughts about that? Because that is how the world virtually operates for the most part.
Yeah, what it brings for me is there are these 5 different levels of power which you can have, and you can relate it to, like, alpha also, because that kind of is all about power. And that at the basic level, you've got physical power, that I'm physically stronger than you, so I can press you down, and then so I'm superior. And then you've got political power or social power, as you explain, like the mafioso. Like, I might be very small and weak, but I've got people behind me, and they'll do what I tell them. So I'm stronger than you, even though you're physically stronger than me. And then you have intellectual power, where I'm able to influence the mafioso. So I don't have this whole entourage, whatever, but I can influence by my superior intelligence. So therefore, I'm more powerful than the mafioso. So these are material levels of power. And then beyond that, you have spiritual power. Is like saintly people who they can actually influence even the intelligent, the intelligent level of people, by their spiritual insight. And they can know, kind of, because they're more finely tuned to reality, they know where to be and where not to be, and they've got a fine intuition which they also follow. And then above and beyond that is also is the power of love, which is the supreme power, and that defeats all other powers. And it's really what there's these particular 6 personalities that I like reading a lot about. They inspire me like anything. They're called these 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. They lived about 550 years ago. They're mostly between Vrindavan and India, and they were traveling around. But there's one poem written about them, and there's one verse which says that they were favored by both the gentle and the rough, because they were envious of no one. They were completely free from envy. There's nothing that they wanted to take from anybody, and everybody liked them. They were favored by absolutely everybody. Even the criminals liked them because of their love that they had for everybody, and they could see the God spark in every single person, and they interacted.
Were they warriors? Were they warriors as well?
No, they weren't warriors. They weren't warriors.
So they were just, what was their mission as they were traveling around? Like, what was their story?
Well, they were, all of them came from very aristocratic positions, and they gave all of that up, and they became renunciants. They accepted loincloths and like that, and they were propounders of the tradition of devotion. They were propounders of that, and they contributed in different ways, by lots of literature, by their own example and things like that, exhibiting different moods. And they were, that's what they were propounding. It's like this path of love and devotion, engaging yourself and purifying your consciousness through engaging your nature in a particular way, which can purify that nature. and all dedicating it as an offering to the divine. In that way, an intimate relationship can be then developed between you and God, and that's what they were doing. And yeah, people.
What did you call them again?
They're known as the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. Their names are, I mean, if you're interested in like reading up, Rupa Goswami.
We're going to do another video about this this group.
Yeah.
So we'll do one for the yoga teacher training people about
good,
this.
good.
I think
They're very nice. They're so amazing.
say their names if you want to.
It's Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Jiva Goswami, and Gopal Bhatta Goswami. It's a yeah. So yeah, these are they
Good job. You got all six in there. Took you a second. That's good.
Yeah. It's really amazing.
I think what's our time at?
Yeah, I think we're at the end of our.
It's really what?
Very inspiring. They inspire me like anything. Like my meditation on them just never runs low.
Beautiful.
When it's out.
Yeah, I want to hear about that. What's our time?
We are at 30 minutes.
Yeesh.
Yes.
Can't stop. We can't get lower than 30 minutes. Thank you once again, Briant. Yeah. And I had a little rundown on alpha male. Thank you very much for once again, and we'll see you tomorrow for day 98.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian. Bye.
Love and light, my friend.